things, physical evidence in the person's residence. You might see a manifesto, things like that. We're not seeing that yet, but we are digging in hard because this is one of the central questions for us. What I can say is that the shooter appears to have done a lot of searches of public figures in general, but so far we're seeing kind of news articles and things like that, and so the images that have been reported about, really what we're talking about there are when you do a news search of an article, the image appears in the cache, as opposed to like a search for that specific individual. But again, I really want to be clear that that's a place that we're doing a lot of work right now, and some more to come on that.
Well, I thank you for that clarification. We're interested also in the role of access to weapons when it comes to this terrible crime. The shooter used a semi-automatic rifle, really a weapon of war, that sadly has also been used in mass shootings around the country, including in my own district. It seems to me that the assault weapons ban that was once in place has to be a part of the national answer to curbing the epidemic of gun violence in America. I wonder if you could, with your help, Director Wray, understand a few aspects of the investigation. It's my understanding that the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, ATF, was quickly able to trace the gun's purchaser, using records from an out-of-business gun store, records that the government is required to correct. Some of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle have suggested that collection should stop. There have been efforts to digitize it, which have been resisted. Can you tell us about how the origin of this gun purchase was discovered and the technology used?
I guess what I can say is we located a number of firearms associated with the shooter and his family. I think it was a total of, 14 in the house. The weapon that he used for the attempted assassination was an AR-style rifle that was purchased legally, that he is my understanding, acquired, bought actually from his father, who was the one who originally bought it, again, legally.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My time has expired, so I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Gentleman from California is recognized.
Thank you. Director, I'll try to ask questions that are answerable too. I think that's been done pretty well on both sides. You do the advanced threat assessment and deliver that information as to the general threat and then specifics as to protected people to the Secret Service. Is that correct?
Well, sort of. The Secret Service does a threat assessment, but they're doing that based on intelligence that they receive from a number of sources, including, of course, the FBI. So we share, whenever we have threat information related to a particular individual or protectee, then we share it with the Secret Service at a number of levels.
So you're a participant, but ultimately the responsibility for threat assessment as to these individuals belongs to the Secret Service.
Well, again, the threat assessment for the individual belongs to the Secret Service, but we are an important part of that because we share threat information, if we have any. They get threat information from a variety of sources. So,
and you get them from that same variety of sources. They've got no sources that are excluded from the FBI, do they?
Well, I don't know. I'm not aware of any that are excluded from the FBI, but they may receive information that comes directly to them that didn't come to us.
Sure. Okay. Director, do you believe that former President Trump was a high-risk threat under your assessment?
Well, I believe that former President Trump, really, frankly, like any president or former president, is a very high-profile figure and attracts a lot of, unfortunately, the kind of threats we've been talking about.
It's fair to say, not on a scale of 1 to a million with little nuances, but on a scale of 1 to 10, President Trump's risk was very similar to a current president, very similar to, because he was the presumptive nominee and leading in the polls and so on, that he was a high risk by any standard. Is that correct?
Certainly, there's a reason why he has so much protection around him.
Okay. Robert F. Kennedy Jr., the son of assassinated senator and the nephew of an assassinated president, would you say he was also, as a presidential candidate, at significant risk?
Again, I think any presidential candidate raises some level of risk. It might vary from candidate to
No, but it's clearly a risk. Okay. In a nutshell, the day before this attack, President Trump was documented not to have gotten on multiple occasions from the Secret Service what they asked for. The day after, it looks like they're getting more. The day before, RFK had been denied by the president multiple times, Secret Service protection. The day after, he now has it. So now my question is the actions of a 20-year-old with a lone gunman on a roof sufficient to change the risk assessment in your mind for President Trump and RFK? Or are we just realizing the threat that was always there and being more appropriate in matching it? And I know that's a little vague, but you've been at this for a long time. Hindsight is 20/20. Now that we have hindsight, is it fair to say that giving Robert F. Kennedy Jr. security, upping the security, including drones, overhead support for the president, former president, these are all things that in hindsight should have been done the day before?
Well, let me try to answer your question this way. Of course, as I said, the assessments of the level of security to be provided to individual protectees.
No, I understand it's a Secret Service decision.
But what I would say to you is that, and I've been saying for quite some time, including in front of committees of this Congress, that we are in an elevated threat. We have been for some time. And that comes from a variety of quarters. It is, quite frankly, a dangerous time to be a prominent public official.
And in regards to that, the other side has spent a lot of time talking about what people on the right have said. But there was an attempted assassination on a Supreme Court justice. We have had the highest-ranking senator on the other side of this body saying that there were actions, that they were accountable. We have had multiple members of Congress in both the House and the Senate berating the character of members of the Supreme Court as a result of their decisions made, both, sometimes 6-3, sometimes unanimous, whatever. Are those comments, not any one of them, but are those comments and the generation of that sort of, oh, this guy's bad for democracy, this Supreme Court justice is a threat to democracy, is that the kind of thing that raises the threat level, and would you caution against that?
Well, I do believe that we've seen an increase in threats of violence, which, again, that's the FBI's lane, not rhetoric, no matter how despicable or heated it is, but violence and threats of violence. We have seen an uptick in threats towards judges, among other prominent public officials, including, as you say, a case that we helped investigate involving a threat to a sitting Supreme Court justice.
An attempt.
An attempt.
Yeah, thank
correct.
you.
Right. And I think it's a reflection of a broader phenomenon that we are seeing in this country where people, again, very passionate, I respect that, very angry, I respect that, but there's a right way and a wrong way to express yourself when you're angry. And violence and threats of violence just can't be it. And that's where we fit in. It's not my role as FBI director to call out particular people's rhetoric. There's a place for that, but that's not my role as FBI director. But when it turns to violence and threats of violence, that has to be treated as unacceptable, and that's the way we look at it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Director, when did the FBI learn that Iran was threatening President Trump's life?
So I want to be a little bit careful here, not to talk about specific classified information, but we have been for quite some time, and I'll stick with what's in the open record. We, for some time, and I in particular for some time, have been calling out the efforts by the Iranian government to attempt to retaliate for the killing of Soleimani by going after current or former prominent U.S. officials, and we've even had an indictment against it. And I think that we need to recognize the brazenness of the Iranian regime, including right here in the United States, And I expect that we're going to see more of it, and I expect there'll be more coming on that. I'm not aware of any threat information related to protectees that wasn't, passed in a timely way, but I can't really get into specifics here.
It's a minority's time here, but I just felt that was a question the committee needed to understand, and it sounds like you've known that for a long Secret Service.
Any information related to threats against the former president, which again, as we've sort of talked about, happens all too often, is something that we have a whole process we routinely share with the Secret Service at a number of levels in a timely way, and to my knowledge, that has consistently been followed.
The gentleman from Georgia is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for being here, Director Wray. Director Wray, the FBI is the independent law enforcement agency under the Department of Justice. Is that correct?
Yes.
And does the FBI director currently report to anyone?
Director Wray, what specifically is the FBI doing to reinforce that such decisions are, in fact, for the private companies to make and not the administration?
So I think the best way to summarize it is that the guidance makes all kinds of additional steps to underscore that the FBI has no interest in participating in any way whatsoever in the company's decision-making, that companies are completely free to take any actions on their own, that we are simply passing information on to them for them to do whatever it is they want to do independently, consistent with, I should say, I very much appreciate the Supreme Court's finding that no evidence that the FBI coerced platforms to take content down.
Well, I don't believe that that's what the Supreme Court found. What the Supreme Court found was that the parties involved didn't have standing, but I think there's a whole body of evidence and legal analysis demonstrating that, in fact, this administration was violating the First Amendment rights of folks through social media companies. I'm just going to ask one final very quick question. If the FBI was involved in the removal or restriction of speech of Americans, do you agree that this would be a violation of the First Amendment?
Well, again, I'm not going to engage in hypotheticals. My understanding and my strong view from everything I've seen is that we did not violate the First Amendment.
Okay.
Gentlelady yields back. Gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Thank you, Director. I've just got two easy questions for you. In February, Donald Trump Jr. received a letter containing a white suspicious powder that read, quote, Lee Harvey Oswald's grandson must complete his contract, end quote. The United States Secret Service and the FBI said they would investigate the matter, and 5 months later, no more information has been released. I've also visited with Mr. Trump, and he has not received any information either. Why is that?
So as I sit here right now, I'm not familiar with the specific investigation, but I do know that we have had, unfortunately, quite a few investigations of threatening mailings and white powder letters and things like that. So I'm happy to drill into it and have us circle back to and see if there's more information we can share about it.
Thank you. And would you maybe circle back to the Mr. Trump, Donald Jr.? I think they'd like an update as well.
Sure. Let me, again, I don't, like I said, I'm not familiar with the specifics, but I'm happy to have us look into it and get back to whoever we need to get back to.
Thank you. Next question. The Pittsburgh field office now handling the assassination attempt investigation. Is that right?
Well, there's several. Their Pittsburgh field office is the lead office. We obviously have lots of, I think it's about half, maybe over half of the FBI's field offices are working on this, including almost every headquarters division. So we have lots and lots and lots, several hundreds of employees working on it.
All right.
But yes.
Pittsburgh's the lead. Okay. This is the same office that botched the Hunter Biden laptop case. And they, in my view, and my constituents and many Americans, displayed a clear reluctance. That's a quote. Reluctance to really do any tasking, quote, effectively failing to investigate, according to the U.S. attorney on the case. My question is, how can we trust this office, and why does it keep reappearing in critical election-related investigations, or is that just dumb luck?
So I want to be a little bit careful on what I can say here, because some of what you're talking about relates to an ongoing investigation being led by the special counsel, Mr. Weiss. But what I can tell you is that the Pittsburgh field office's involvement in the matter you're talking about was the choice by the Attorney General Barr to have the U.S. Attorney and the FBI field office in Pittsburgh handle that particular matter. As to your summary or characterization of what U.S. Attorney, now former U.S. Attorney Brady actually said, I'd have to see the whole context. I'm not quite sure that's what he said, but I think as to your overall question about confidence, what I would tell you is we have, that's the point I'm trying to make about the sheer breadth of our investigation. Yes, the Pittsburgh field office is the office on the ground. That's where the attempted assassination happened. But we are using the full might of the FBI, criminal and national security. That's why I'm pointing out that multiple field offices, over half of our field offices, almost every headquarters division, several hundreds of employees. These are people who are working around the clock to deal with this historic attack. And I have the utmost confidence in those hundreds of employees, agents, analysts, and professional staff, and the American people should too.
I yield to Mr. Jordan.
I appreciate the gentleman yielding. Director, I guess I'm not clear exactly where you said there were 8 shell casings on the roof, so 8 bullets were fired. We obviously know that Mr. Compratore lost his life. Two other rally-goers were injured, seriously injured, and then the one that hit President Trump. Does that account for, were some of these individuals hit multiple times? Where did all 8 bullets go, is I guess my question.
I don't have that in front of me. I'm happy to circle back and get that to you, assuming we have that information yet. As I said, I think with respect to former President Trump, there's some question about whether or not it's a bullet or shrapnel that hit his ear. So it's conceivable, although as I sit here right now, I don't know whether that bullet, in addition to causing the grazing, could have also landed somewhere else. But I believe we've accounted for all of the shots and the cartridges. So let us get that.
It's my understanding that the very first one was the one that hit the president. Is that the very first shot, or is that not accurate?
I don't, as I sit here right now, I don't know the answer to that. I believe we know the answer to that. I just don't have it in front of me.
Okay. Is there any chance I mean, it seems to me that this bad guy, this shooter, was focused on President Trump, but you indicated that he purchased 50 rounds of ammunition, I believe, earlier that day. Do you have any indication thus far in your investigation that in addition to going after and trying to assassinate the former president, he was also looking to do a lot more damage to other individuals?
That's a hard question to answer. What I would say is I agree with you that his preparatory activity is what we've seen so far, the limited information that has been relevant and interesting about his preparatory activity does seem to be that he had settled on former President Trump as a target and this rally as his moment to try to take a shot. But in addition to the 50 rounds, of course, you have the issue of these explosive devices.
Right.
And so what else he may have had in mind is something that I think is very much of an open question. On the one hand, you have these explosive devices, including the one still back in his home that wasn't in quite the same stage as the one in the ones in the vehicle. But he clearly had those explosive devices for some reason. And so we're trying to figure that out. As I've said before, sometimes in these kind of situations, you find like a manifesto or something like that. It's frustrating to us, and I'm sure frustrating to you and the American people, that we haven't found anything quite like that. We'd love to have a roadmap that tells us exactly what he was thinking. We haven't found that yet. Doesn't mean we won't. We're looking all over the place, and we're going to leave no stone unturned.
Thank you. A gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Director, for being here today. I know it's been a very long day, busy day on Capitol Hill, and also I want to apologize in advance if there's any repetitive questions from me. But I have to ask, given that our sitting president resigned from the campaign on Sunday and the Secret Service Director resigned yesterday, you don't plan on resigning anytime soon, do you, sir?
No, sir.
Good to go. Earlier today, you told this committee that you recovered 8 bullet cartridges from the roof next to the shooter. And given that testimony, I have 2 questions for you. How many shots were fired at President Trump, and how many shots were fired in total of the entire day? I know I keep hearing 8, but were there any more that were unaccounted for?
the best information I have right now is 8 shots. As to the sequence, I'm not sure I have that sitting here right now. As I said to the chairman, I'm going to go back to my team and see if we've got that nailed down yet. And if we have, I'm happy to share it with you and the rest of the committee.
Please do, sir. Thank you very much for that. You also mentioned that the shooter used encrypted messages to communicate. Specifically, do you know what apps or what apps he was using to communicate, and can you confirm if he was communicating with any foreign nationals through the encrypted messages?
So as to the names of the apps, I don't have that right here in front of me. As far as communicating with any foreign actors, I'll say 2 things. One, we haven't, as I think I've testified before, but we have not, at the moment at least, identified any accomplices or co-conspirators, foreign or domestic. Okay. So that, as to foreign contacts, of course, that's part of why we want to get access to the encrypted messages, because that might tell us whether he'd been in contact with somebody.
Thank you. Let's talk about motive. I know the FBI has taken a lead role in investigating the assassination on President Trump. Your team has searched the shooter's phone, conducted countless interviews, done extensive research into his motives. As of today, July 24th, 2024, do you and your team know the motive of the shooter or have any idea on what could have driven it?
Well, know and have any idea are two very different things.
Okay.
We do not know the motive. That is obviously one of the central questions in our investigation, and it's been very frustrating to us that a lot of the usual kind of low-hanging fruit places that we would find at have not yielded significant clues about his motive. Okay. Having said that, we have seen indications that he was interested in public figures. And that in the period around July 6th, leading up to July 13th, he does seem to have become very focused on this particular rally and former President Trump. But exactly what his thought process was in doing that, that's something that's still very much under investigation.
I want to make something clear to the American people to try to help out what motive could be. And again, it's not my job to steer it, but here are some of my thoughts. I'm not sure about motive either, specifically, but I can tell you that after this assassination attempt, people on both sides have said that both parties need to tone down the rhetoric. But recently, just on Monday, in fact, President Biden called into the Harris campaign event and said that President Trump was a threat to democracy. Just take a look behind me at these photos. This is a magazine cover of the New Republic from June 2024, published just 1 month before the assassination attempt on President Trump. In a tweet explaining the cover, the New Republic said this: "Today, we at the New Republic think we can spend this election year in one of 2 ways. We could spend it debating whether Trump meets the 9 or 17 points that define fascism, or we could spend it saying he's damn close enough and we'd better fight. We unreservedly choose the latter course." Now, sir, I know you said that the FBI doesn't have a clear motive yet, and you've explained that, but in your professional experience as an investigator, do you think that language like this could radicalize someone to engage in political violence?
I certainly understand the point of the question. What I would tell you is that, respectfully, I don't think it's appropriate for me as FBI director to be characterizing or engaging in public commentary on specific people's rhetoric, and that's because it's not that I don't understand why you're raising the question, but I'm saying that in my role, I have to be very careful to make sure we speak through our work, and we speak through our cases and our intelligence products, not the FBI director chiming in the public square on different people's political commentary.
I understand. For the record, there was an assassination attempt on an American president, and I will be asking these same questions even if it were President Biden. And my message to the American people is that we need to do better. I yield back the rest of my time, and thank you for being here, sir. I know it's been a very long day.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from South Carolina is recognized.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Director, for being here. It's refreshing. I was in the oversight hearing earlier this week, and although we don't have an idea on everything, your ability to come in here and actually give way more than Director Cheadle ever did is somewhat refreshing. You saw some pretty bipartisan frustrations exhibited in that particular hearing. I'm sure you've seen part of it. I want to follow up on a couple of lines of questions that I had with Director Cheadle that she actually answered, which was remarkable. One, she had indicated that Secret Service at the Trump rally did not have any radio recordings. Is that, in your investigation, is that accurate?
I'm not sure I know the answer to that. I believe we have, there may be some recordings on the local law enforcement side. As to whether or not we have recordings on the Secret Service side, I'd have to drill back into that. And the reason you might say, well, how the heck can you not know? Well, we certainly have interviewed lots of Secret Service employees, so what we know from the interviews versus some other source, as I sit here right now, I don't know.
So on this particular case, but in your experience, and again, it's a different agency, but she had indicated, Director Cheadle had indicated that recordings sometimes are done from radio recordings, I guess, of what happens at a Trump rally or any other thing that they're engaged in. Is that your experience as well, that sometimes there are audio recordings of communications between law enforcement officials?
Just speaking very broadly. There are times when there are recordings, but it'd be hard for me to be more precise than that.
And I know that you can't answer whether they were here in this instance or not, but what would cause recordings to not exist for the Trump rally, if, as a hypothetical, what would be the reason that would happen?
I'm afraid I don't know the answer to that. I mean, if they didn't record, there may be situations where they just don't record in the first place, and why that would be, though, I'm not sure I can answer that.
Thank you. Let me ask you this, and this is another line of questioning. Director Cheadle had indicated that seconds before the would-be assassin fired the shot, is roughly seconds, is when he became a person of suspicion to an actual threat. Would you agree with that assessment from Director Cheadle?
Well, let me try it this way. I think there are sort of three, in my mind, there's sort of three, let's say three significant moments on this continuum that you're kind of getting at. There is roughly an hour before the shooting when local law enforcement observes the individual, the shooter. At that point, as somebody that was a person of concern. I forgot the exact phrasing, and that was based on seeing him with this rangefinder, no observation of a weapon, but there was something odd and off about them that caught local law enforcement's attention. So that's the first moment. Then there's a second moment, which is, I think just minutes before the shooting, where local law enforcement observed him on the roof, but didn't see a weapon, is my understanding at that point. And at that point, their level of concern obviously was even higher. And then there's the third moment, which is that moment when local law enforcement saw him, the officer who climbed up with the assistance of his colleague, and saw the shooter in the prone position with the weapon, and that's seconds before the event. And so, terminology, I'm not sure, but it seems to me there's an evolution of concern over that time period.
Correct, an escalating concern. At what point, and this again I just don't know, so I'm curious, at what point is, say, the sniper who killed Mr. Crooks, at what point is he able to fire a shot, and does he have to have authorization in which to do that?
I don't know that I know Secret Service's rules of engagement in that situation. It's possible that our interview of the counter-sniper has uncovered that. Again, our focus has been, I certainly understand why you're asking the question, but our focus has been on the shooter himself and his actions and the attack. These two other reviews, the DHS Inspector General and the outside independent panel, are both looking at the performance of the Secret Service, which would, I'm confident, include the question that you're talking about.
Thank you. And I actually think, from a legislative purpose and what this body will probably ultimately do, it's of great importance that we break down barriers of communication and that we allow, officers to do their job without, so that this doesn't happen again. And I appreciate you being here. Thank you, Director.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Well, once again, as Congressman Fry said, we want to thank you for your time and a lot more information today than Monday. So thank you for that. I just have a handful of questions. I would love to have just a simple yes or no so we could get done with this. So on day one, President Biden issued an executive order mandating DEI programs in the executive branch. You responded by hiring FBI's first ever chief diversity officer. You're even on the Bureau's website quoting saying that diversity and inclusion of the workforce is something I care deeply about because the success of our efforts impacts our operations, our culture, and our future. End of quote. So, Director, just a simple yes or no, do you still find DEI hiring practices to be central to the FBI's operations, cultures, and future?
I believe that diversity is an important part, is a core value of a high-performing organization.
Do you have any concerns that our Homeland Security efforts will be hampered if the FBI continues to use DEI as a primary hiring measure?
I don't believe that we use DEI as a primary hiring metric. I would say that we have not lowered our standards.
Yes or no, please?
Let me, if I could finish. It's not a yes or no question. We have not lowered our standards, and the facts back that up.
Are you aware of a 112-page report compiled by senior agents and analysts which stated, quote, if the current trajectory of the FBI special agent recruitment and selection continues, using DEI as the primary and sole measure of our Homeland Security efforts will be significantly hampered. Do you know about that 112-page report?
I'm aware of a report from a number of anonymous former employees.
Thank you. Do you agree that protecting the former president falls under the umbrella of Homeland Security?
Well, protecting the former president, the physical security, the protective detail on the former president is the province of the Secret Service, which is part of the Department of Homeland Security.
It is my understanding that historically the FBI had 100,000 applications for special agents on file at any given time of the year. So talking about slipping recruitment, are you aware that on February of 2024, a letter from the FBI's Assistant Director for Training Division, which reported that FBI only received an estimated 48,000 applications over a 2-year period?
I don't know if we're comparing apple to apple. What I can tell you is that in the time that I've been FBI director, the number of Americans applying to be special agent has gone up dramatically. To the tune of, in some cases, double or triple the pace
so
it was when I. If I could
wrong?
finish, sir, if I could finish, please. To a rate that is higher, you'd have to go back about a decade or so to find the number of Americans applying to be special agents that are currently applying.
Okay, so for the record, that 48,000 is probably wrong then in your eyes?
I don't know. I don't have the letter in front of me, but what I'm not sure of is that we're comparing apple to apple in terms of time periods and everything else.
In advance of the Trump shooting, United States Secret Service Special Agent in charge Tim Burke reportedly told law enforcement partners that NATO summit in Washington, D.C. limited his resources available to the Trump rally. The service has similar DEI hiring aims and failed their zero-fail mission to protect President Trump. Director Cheadle has since stepped down. Could the hyperfixation on hitting Biden administration's imposed DEI rules by causing the FBI and the federal law enforcement agencies to not only miss their prime candidates, but also potential threats?
Well, I can't speak to Secret Service's hiring practice. What I can tell you is that, in my view, diversity, like everything else, is something that has to be done in the right way. Just like everything else, there's a right way and a wrong way to achieve it. I think we can and have achieved improvements in diversity and, at the same time, not lowered our standards. And I think part of the reason we've been able to do that is because of the encouraging increase in the number of Americans applying to be special agents.
The investigation into the planting of pipe bombs at the RNC and DNC headquarters has been going on for over 3.5 years and will soon have lasted longer than the Biden presidency. I look forward to you proving yourselves because we haven't received any update right now on the Trump shooting since July 15th, and the people really need that. Can the public expect a more transparent and timely investigation into the attempted assassination of former President Trump?
I've been testifying here all day about the investigation into attempted assassination of former President Trump, and we've done multiple briefings, and I've answered multiple questions.
And we appreciate that because,
okay,
like
that's
I said,
what you were asking.
Well, it just seems like there hasn't been a press conference to the people to go through all the different details that were already presented today. And I'll just leave you with one final question. the government is not doing their job. Do you feel as the director that perhaps like not only the FBI, but the Secret Service needs to have a complete reconstruction? Or do you think it's still put together the way that could best do its job?
The FBI that I see every single day, having visited all 56 of our field offices at least twice, many of them 3 times, the FBI that I see engaging with state and local law enforcement from all 50 states, that I hear about from prosecutors, judges, business leaders, community leaders, foreign partners, is an FBI that is respected, trusted, appreciated, and that is there for people when they need them the most. And that is the FBI that I see, and I'm very proud to be a part of them.
Any comment on the other agencies?
No, I'm not going to comment on other agencies.
Appreciate your time, sir. Yield back to the chair.
Gentleman yields back. Director, I have just a couple quick questions, but I want to give to the ranking member a chance to say some remarks or questions, and then we'll be done.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, I'd like to say, as somebody, when I grew up, I watched The Untouchables, and I think Elliot Ness would be proud of you.